Welcome to the first 5-0 Monday for your Indiana football Hoosiers since 1967. And here to chat about this 5-0 start, as always, is our man Mitchell Paige, who was in attendance for Indiana's win against Maryland this weekend.
Yeah, I was a little nervous with the radar, what the turnout would be. Unbelievable. Game was basically over. Stadium was 80% full. The team's awesome. If you haven't been, you have to go. It's bordering on feeling kind of magical, if I'm
You
honest.
mentioned that last week, and I was going to go into that because it is kind of getting into that territory of that magic feeling that you're talking about.
Yeah, there's just something about him. I don't know. We opened the game with 2 interceptions. I think we had 3 turnovers in the first half, and it still just doesn't feel like it's ever in question. It feels like the end is already determined, which is very bizarre.
Which is weird because it felt whenever that was the case before, it felt like the end was always determined, but you knew it was going to be an Indiana loss. Now the tides have turned, and it feels like this team can't figure out a way to lose.
Yeah, it's exactly that. There's only, I think, a couple fan bases maybe in the country that feel, and theirs is probably a little more warranted than I do. I'm not comparing us directly to these teams, but the feeling is similar because it just doesn't feel like there's ever any stress. It's just a slow, methodical beatdown every week. We're just going to run it right at your face. We're going to convert on third down. And on defense, we're going to swarm you. It feels like there's 4 guys tackling the guy with the ball every play. They fly around. They're sound. And they're fun, man. I imagine this is what Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State fans feel like, where even if you start the game a little slow, it's inevitable that we're just going to roll you. And so far, they've lived up to it.
And I got to say, my wife actually saw this video yesterday. I think it was on your wife's social media. She was panning around the stadium, and it eventually got to where you were sitting at the time. And I believe it was at the end of the game.
Yeah.
And you were doing the whole we eating type movement. And she thought it was the funniest thing. But you were in your own little world. You were embracing the magic of this new Indiana football team.
Yeah. It's only that. I'm as if you listen to this and if you've ever heard me talking, you know I'm kind of a psycho. So when I go to games, usually I'm the only psycho, but it's kind of nice. There's psychos all around. I don't care if you've never cheered for Indiana again. Everybody talks about like bandwagon fans, whatever, now that we're 23rd in the nation. I don't care. All are welcome. Come be crazy. What did the ESPN FBI said? 40% chance
for the college football playoff as of right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when is the last time that happened? And who knows? Maybe this is a forever thing under Cignetti. Who knows? But sometimes you just get seasons that feel a little different. If you haven't been in the stadium, go. Let's take over in Chicago. I think that place is going to be a home game north. I think the whole place is going to be red.
Before the season even started, the tickets for the Indiana Northwestern game were already super expensive. I don't know if it was because, I don't know. It's likely because of the high alumni base in the Chicago area for Indiana and the uniqueness of playing in that temporary stadium. And if there's any tickets left, I'm sure they're even harder to get now just because of how good this Indiana team's become. And not to say that we didn't expect it, and we have talked about this. Looking at this all in retrospect now is just weird because we all theoretically talked about the perfect scenario for Cignetti and how favorable the schedule has been. And now they are on the brink of a 6-0 start. It would officially become the second best start to an Indiana football season in history behind the 8-0 start. That was in 1967 and that was also the Rose Bowl year, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes.
So you'd be 6-0 at the midway point in the season if you take care of business against Northwestern. I don't know if you've seen the line, Mitchell. I'm sure you have. Started off at 10.5. I think it's already up at 14. It's a little scary, but mainly just from the standpoint of you don't want to see the letdown game now, right? Do you think there is a chance that after getting another awesome win for the program that maybe you see Northwestern be a little more competitive against Indiana than you might expect, especially with them coming off of a bye week?
Yeah, I think I've talked about them a ton. It can be dreary up there. Depending on the weather, you get some of the lake effect. It's maybe a little chillier. They haven't been super explosive, at least in their first 4 games, but they're always stingy. Uh, they're always well coached, and it just doesn't. Some games you look at and you're like, okay, there needs to be a lot to go right for Northwestern for this to even be a game. But it doesn't feel like that whenever you're playing Northwestern specifically. And it's for the reasons I just mentioned. The stadium is sleepy. If this was a home game, I think Indiana wins by 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
But it's just a sleepy atmosphere. Unless, I anticipate the entire stadium being red, literally the whole stadium, and that'll help a bunch. It's a classic kind of letdown. We're 5-0. We're finally ranked. Northwestern has just been really bad on offense. Yeah, if there was going to be a letdown spot, this is kind of it, and we'll see how they manage. Not the new hype, but the continued hype.
You're not wrong when you say that, because there are different levels to what's happened so far this year. There was obviously the beginning of the season where you just like to see them execute against teams they're supposed to do well against, with FIU and Western Illinois. Then you go out on the road, you raise the bar by getting a road win against a brand new team in the Big Ten with UCLA. Even though they may not be very good, you completely dominate them from start to finish. Excuse me. Then you have this weekend where you kind of have one of those 50-50 games against Maryland, where it was kind of back and forth for a while. You took control in the second half. You somehow cover the spread, even though you turn the ball over 4 times, and you also hit the over in this game. So that once you do all those things, that raises the bar another level. And at this point is, I guess, to see how far you can take it, right? And when we talked about how the ceiling keeps getting raised for this team, the ESPN FBI that we so frequently mention thinks Indiana has a decent chance to go 11-1, which, even saying that out loud, it seems like complete nonsense. But again, the further you get into this, the less nonsensical it actually becomes, because they keep delivering.
Yeah, I think you'd referenced what we were talking about before the season. And we talked about this being a possibility, but it was almost with like childlike excitement, right?
Yes.
It felt unrealistic. Even as the words were coming out of my mouth, you hope for the best, but expect the worst, kind of. And there's a legitimate chance, I think, that they're going to be 10-0. And I actually am getting myself to believe it. 10-0 when they go to Columbus. I think they handle business.
This too. Even though I don't think Michigan is as good as their number 10 ranking indicates, I hope they keep finding ways to win, just 100%. So that when
I would love
whenever
them to be
Indiana
6,
gets to that
7,
game,
8.
it looks a lot better, of course.
Yeah. If they can be 6, 7, 8, because by then the college football playoff will be out, the rankings and stuff. Indiana may sneak in on some of those. If Michigan comes in as the number 6 or 7 team and you just take it to them, that'd be huge. Nebraska obviously is still a fishy one. I don't think, and this is gonna annoy some of our friends, Dustin and his girlfriend, but I don't think they really are very good. I really don't. I think they've got a lot of talent, but I just don't. For whatever reason, I'm not afraid of them. I was much more afraid of Maryland than I am for Nebraska. And maybe that's just because of what history tells me. Maryland's always been kind of a thorn in the side to Indiana, and Nebraska has been so bad for so long, kind of like Indiana. I don't know if that plays into it.
I do think part of it too with Nebraska, especially when you take Indiana and Nebraska facing each other specifically, you have a 5th-year senior with Indiana's quarterback who knows exactly what he's doing, knows how to be calm, versus even though you have a phenom in Dylan Raiola with Nebraska, he's a baby freshman. He's going to make mistakes. He looked awful in the overtime frame against Illinois, and he's going to continue to have to grow before he really gets to his full potential. I bet give it a year or two, he'll probably be the best quarterback in college football. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I feel like he's going to end up being that guy, maybe even a number 1 draft pick down the line. Maybe I'm just expecting too much, but it just feels like it's been a while since really Nebraska specifically has had a quarterback that seems to have that much promise behind him. So maybe that's why it seems like there's so much hype behind him.
Yeah, I just don't trust him. My first exposure to Nebraska was in 2002 when I've told you before I was a Miami Hurricanes fan, diehard growing up. And if you're familiar with the history of college football, that Miami Hurricanes team, I don't care what you say about the 2019 LSU team, Miami team was the best team ever assembled, and it wasn't close. And Eric Crouch was the quarterback at Nebraska. He just won the Heisman, yada, 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 and Miami beat him like 50-7. So that's the first experience I have with the Cornhuskers. And nothing's really changed since then. They have 100 million fans that think they're the best, and they have an awesome stadium, and I think awesome uniforms and great tradition, whatever. And then they just lay out stinkers. And I think that Indiana is going to have no problem with them. But that's looking forward. I know that's next week. 2 weeks from now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the lovely, how do you even say this? I mean, I know how to say it. I'm word vomiting, if you will. You have the perfect bye week right at the midway point of the season. And I know you have 2 bye weeks. And it feels like the second bye week comes at the second best opportune time, which is right in between Michigan and Ohio State.
It is funny. The more you dive into this schedule, this is a schedule from the gods. If you believe in college football gods, this is a gift from them.
And what's even crazier about it, too, is they redid this schedule like 2 or 3 different times because of all the different shuffling around with the teams and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm going to continue to say it. If you haven't been in the stadium, if you have the ability to, you need to go. The energy, we walk through the tailgate fields, and those are always excitable, right? They're always pretty good, but they're full, packed to the brim. And I'm doing my typical, make sure you go in the game, yelling at everybody. And usually I get a look like, get away from me. Who are you? And this time people were like, well, of course, where else would I go? And they start following. It was in droves into the stadium. It started off I was a little nervous, right, for the opening kick. And people were coming into the stadium all the way through probably the end of the first quarter. It was just a constant wave of people. It was rainy, semi-cold, and they just stuck it out. I'm so excited. I'll be in the building again for Nebraska. I can't.
And that is, again, we're all the more closer to, again, the other thing we've talked about since the beginning, I almost said nightmare scenario, maybe more so a nightmare for Nebraska potentially, but you come in, you're 6-0, you've already hit bowl eligibility. You are facing a Nebraska team who won't be undefeated, unfortunately. That was the other part of the dream that unfortunately will not happen. But you have homecoming, you have Hoosier hysteria that weekend, and it just feels like it sets up perfectly to be probably the biggest Saturday, I don't want to say of the entire collegiate athletics calendar for Indiana, because you never know how Indiana basketball is going to end up being. But as it stands right now, I don't see a better situation for a top-notch crowd. I guess the only other better situation you could have is if you're unbeaten going into the Purdue game at the end of the year, because at that point you're just like, wow, how the hell did this happen?
Yeah. And I'm going to touch on the basketball thing. There's a reason that football brings all the money. If Indiana can find a way to execute Saturday, you get 2 weeks of build up to this homecoming game. Basketball is awesome, but typically it's freezing. Tailgate scenes are kind of light. Doesn't even matter when the game is. There's only 18,000 people that can fit in there. You have a big football Saturday where you can get 50,000 people in the stadium, plus an additional 50,000, 100,000, who knows, tailgating. And you get Hoosier hysteria that people will always love. And it's still a basketball school. It is. But when you have a football team that's producing it, there's just nothing like it. The weather is crisp, and it just I get chills thinking about it, honestly.
It'll be October 19th. You're legitimately nearly a month into the fall season at that point. There's no reason it shouldn't be the most absolute perfect fall day in Bloomington. And I plan on being up there as well, as long as the University of Louisville does not play at a conflicting time. If they play on opposite ends of the day, if Indiana's at noon and U of L's at night, I'll be there, or vice versa. If Louisville's at noon and Indiana's at night, I'll be there.
So let me tell you a little thing. This is behind the scenes in Mitchell Paige's world. This doesn't really matter about Indiana. I will 100% be at Indiana no matter what. But in the scenario that you just talked about, where Indiana plays early, Miami plays late, or Louisville plays late, and Miami plays
just
Louisville.
For reference, for those who don't know, I reference Louisville because I have to run post-game shows for them.
Yep.
That's the only reason I say that.
Louisville plays Miami that day.
That is true.
In Louisville. So if it works out that they're at the opposite ends of the spectrum, I will probably go to both games. We're going 2 for 1 Saturday. And
at that point, I need you calling into the Louisville postgame show, especially if Miami were to beat them, because that'd be hilarious.
They're going to beat the brakes off them. It's going to be a big problem for those guys. We're not a Miami postgame show, but the fact that they got by Virginia Tech this weekend, ain't nobody going to beat them.
It's just good vibes all around for all the football this year, isn't it? And again, your newborn daughter, MP, she's undefeated.
10-0. There she is in the back.
There you go. Listen to that.
She's 10-0.
Ears are burning, as they say.
She knows it. She was never even afraid. She's by far the most successful Paige, and she's been on Earth for 3 months.
That's the way to do it right there. And, man, I guess we'll go. Anything else we want to talk about before we wrap this thing up? Or I mean, there's not much else to say, I feel like, other than what we've already hit on.
Yeah, I'll just finish with another clinical performance. You punch yourself or shoot yourself in the foot 4 separate times. I think there's some statistic when you turn the ball over 4 times, your chance of winning goes down to like 0.5% or something. And Indiana didn't just win, they smoked them. It was 42-21 realistically. Like, you give up a late touchdown. I mean, they doubled them up. It was never close, never.
And there were a lot of people bitching about the defense, which I know it wasn't ideal comparatively speaking, but at the same time, Maryland has a really good offense.
Yes. So you say the people were mad about Indiana's defense. Maryland's offense was on the same level as Indiana's coming into the game. Their quarterback, I think, had more yards, more touchdowns. They were moving at a really, really good rate. And the fact that Indiana's D-line can get to the quarterback as often as they did, play as good a third down defense as they did, like it, you have to, all things are comparative, right? Maryland's got explosive receivers. Okay, we gave up a couple long passes. That happens. They have good players that are on scholarship too. Sometimes you just get beat. It happens. And they were able to it never felt like we got on our heels. And I'm going to continue to say that. It always feels like we're churning forward. Sometimes it's a little slower than normal or slower than we would like, but it feels inevitable that train's going to get rolling, and you better get out of the way if you're on the tracks. And Maryland's quarterback felt like he was on the tracks a couple times. He just got hit and hit and hit and hit. And that's how you take an offense like that out of the game. 21 points through 55 minutes. It's not a winning combination for Maryland, especially on the road. So, yeah, we'll see this weekend. This is a much less potent offense, but I think a little stingier defense. But if they keep executing, I'm not sure who's going to beat the Hoosiers for a while.
Chance to go 6-0 for the first time in a very long time. Mitchell Paige, I appreciate your time as always. And as always, we'll do it again next Monday.
Yes, sir. 6-0 coming at us.